I don't think it's possible that isolating your descendants in whiteness will do positive things for the world.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I don't use the term white to describe myself. I don't think it does justice to the kind of mongrel nature of my ancestry, first of all. And I think it's a false category. And yeah, obviously one that's been used to oppress people. And
Mm,
so I think, my little project is like, let's dissolve that terminology and get more
yeah,
specific, and if it takes me a few minutes to explain where my people are from, well, so be it.
yeah,
Uh, yeah. But I think
yeah,
like these kind of religious traditions, the fact that they are so open and so adaptable, there's something to them that seems to me like that's like the liberation theology of the future in a way. If we're going to um, get along better in the world and with the world at large.
yeah. Amen, brother. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think some of these ways of thinking and practicing developed by um, Afro-descendant peoples, I think in the path that everybody has, or that so many people are thinking about towards a decolonial future, I think it has an incredible potential. And what you're actually already seeing today is, for instance, indigenous peoples applying these ways of thinking. So you see in Brazil, there's a group called the Pataxó who have been subjected to an extremely violent colonial process, and they have been very ruptured. And they are using Afro-Brazilian candomblé in order to recover and reinvent their own ancestrality, indigenous Brazilians. So, so I think that when we on this path to a decolonial future, I think stuff like Santeria, voodoo, I think it has an incredible potential to uh, pose um, nodes of resilience towards modernity, to create counter-modern spaces of animist, functional animist technology
Mm.
for all peoples.
I don't know why, but I get really excited when I hear that or think about that possibility. It excites me. Like I feel
Mm,
the ashe in my body rising.
mm,
Like, what's interesting about that is it's somewhat paradoxical in a way, or it might seem paradoxical to some people, especially the kind of white academic segregationalists. Um, I was with a teacher years ago called Stephen Jenkinson here in Canada. He's done a lot of writing about death and dying and things. Um, and over the course of the week that I was with him, he was speaking quite a bit about Euro-descended people going to other cultures and taking up things like yoga or going to the jungle and drinking ayahuasca. And he had a kind of a denigrating tone when he would talk about these things. And so after one of the sessions, I went up and spoke with him. I said, look, I've been really sincerely engaged in some of these practices, like especially yoga and working with ayahuasca through this Santo Daime cult. I said, it's really helped me in my life. It's been really beneficial. So when I hear you denigrate them, I wonder, like, what do you expect from us if we don't have a living tradition here in North America as Euro-descended people, other than Christianity and Protestant Christianity, which was never appealing to me? What do you expect us to do with all of that? And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, "Well, what if consider the possibility that actually your ancestors put you on those paths of yoga or plant medicine or shamanism in order for you to find your way back to them." And when I hear you talk about going to Brazil and being engaged in candomblé and having this awakening to these Nordic spirits and ancestry, there is that kind of strange trickster quality to it.
mm,
Like You know, you go to the exotic and you end up finding yourself right back at home, but with a different perspective, one that we might call animist. And I mean, that was very much my experience, and that allowed me actually to connect to this land more and to engage with native people without being so hungry to take on their rites and rituals, but
Mm,
to appreciate what they were doing and maybe learn about possible ways to put it into practice, the
mm.
engagement with the aliveness of the world and all of its uh, diversity, right? And you produced a short film called Finfara that
Mm.
tells a story like this about this Sami guy. So an indigenous Finlander, I guess, right? Is the Sami people? They're from around
Uh,
Finland, or
no, he's actually from the border between Norway and Sweden. And Sapmi, the Sami areas, are actually in both Russia, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. Um,
okay, but he's a you would consider them indigenous people, the Sami?
certainly, certainly, they're an
Okay.
indigenous population. Yeah,
Can you tell the story
yeah.
of
This
him?
is yeah yeah. This is an amazing story. When I heard about Jungle Swanee is his name, uh, I thought, man, that would be interesting to hear that because he he grew up as a non-nationalized reindeer herder, traditional indigenous Sami in like a no-road country in the far north of Scandinavia, a place called Katawarma. And as he explained it to me, he at an early point in his life felt this calling towards shamanism, the lost shamanism of his own people. The Sami used to have religious experts, what would be called shamans, called nuaidit. Sometimes the craft is called nuaidi water, and they have that was there, and it was then discontinued as a consequence of colonialism. They were persecuted rather violently, their shamans. So Jungle, he basically decided, or he lived for a long time alone in the wilderness, and then at some point he reached the point where he felt he needed an actual teacher. So he managed to raise money to go to South America, and then he was it Ecuador? I think he went into the jungle, found a teacher, and stayed there for 5 or 6 years in a one-to-one apprenticeship relation with the teacher there. And after that, he went back to Sapmi, as well a fully educated shaman. And I found that story amazing because it, in a sense, it mirrors what I've done myself. Um, the uh, the uh, the Nordic peoples actually had a word for that, which was Finn faring to the Finns, and the word Finns was an old word for the Sami. Today, the word Finns means people from
Ah,
Finland, which is a slightly different people. So, so you can see in the old Christian laws from the Middle Ages that they say they prohibit a practice which is visiting the Finns or going to the Finns to seek prophetic knowledge or animist knowledge, basically, which means that you can see that people probably did exactly that. They went to the Sami to learn from Sami people. So this
mm,
is a traditional knowledge uh, uh, context where the practice of a traditional animism is seen as inherently based on engagement with others. The Sami in the Nordic context was an other, and in the pre-Christian context, that was considered a positive thing. It was they were considered powerful. There would probably also have been conflicts with them and so on, but they were considered important and they were considered powerful. And early Norwegian kings, um, when they wrote their sagas, they took good care to emphasize that they had Sami ancestry. So a way of saying I am a legitimate, powerful Viking king, was to say, yeah, and my ancestors were Sami reindeer herders. The connectivity to other is important. So I have thought of my own going to South America to learn from these perspectives as a Finnfara, a way of visiting the other. And I think this visiting the other is like today is probably a universal thing. There's so many people who seek other in order to, at some point, perhaps be turned towards their own root culture in one way or the other. And in this very globalized world, these engagement with other can be perhaps surprising and enriching in surprising ways. Like, I'm 100% ethnically unambiguous old worlder from Scandinavia, but my path, you could say, towards realizing this engagement with my own tradition is, you could say, it's 100% American because it comes from, because I've learned to think about these things by candomblé priestesses. The methodology that underlies how I think is predicated on these Creole patterns of cultural resilience that has emerged in the Americas, right? I think there's a beauty to that somehow, and I think that when you, perhaps is also why I think, as I think I said before, I think some of the responses to our time are probably going to come from the Americas, exactly as you say, because you live like down the road from a colonial situation, a colonial reality, that for your peers in the study group can be a little bit difficult to understand because they're not close to it in that way. And when you talk about your own ancestry as mongrel or very mixed, I think that is like, I think the responses that we need in the future, they will take that and make that a source of pride. That
Right.
is,
Value that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And which
Yeah.
you sometimes see in you see it in Brazil and Mexico, for instance. You see that they build their self-image in a positive way on their mixedness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible that at the same time that there is a lot of this drawing of really hard lines that thou shalt not cross, thou shalt not intermix. That's happening really intensely in my country right now. Right now, there are protests going on all over the country about, well, a movement to include more kind of gender studies in primary school from kindergarten up. And there's people who, I mean, it's a whole thing. But just to say that's indicative of the kind of divisions that are really strong right now. And at the same time, there's something else kind of bubbling away. This Creole mix. Um, I mean, I just find it really kind of amazing, and it gives me a hope for the future that, you know, when I talk to somebody like Bio and I talk to you, uh, it gives me hope, you know,
Mm.
that there is a future that we can't even imagine because it's going to be so kind of mixed up and strange that we can't even conceive of it from this
Mm.
vantage point.
And
Yeah.
perhaps it's going to be place focused. Like perhaps in Bio's Yoruba tradition, they would call it an ile, a place, or an ile ashe, they would say in Brazil, a place where a certain ashe is is flowing, and that is where a group of people derive their self-image. Like uh, in a sense, that is very strongly animist, that being bound to place. So an example is I launched I didn't launch, I developed this Nordic Animism platform and have been developing this thought and this thinking about Nordic Animism as a way of thinking about Euro traditional knowledge, right? And then at some point I saw at Facebook that there was this guy who had he even made like a little logo, and he called it Appalachian Animism. And I think he might have been inspired by me. I hope he was. I would be so proud of you. I think he was probably inspired by me. And to me, that was perfect. It was perfect. Like that thing that there are some people there who are like inspired, and they take the ball, they run with it, and then what they're doing is that they're thinking about their place. This was Appalachian animism. It wasn't, I don't know, white people's
Nordic,
animism.
it wasn't Nordic animism, yeah, kind of
Yeah, yeah,
transported into Appalachia.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's the thing about animism, is it is going to, I mean, if it's not just a kind of thought experiment or even a belief
yeah,
system, it connects you to place. It just
yeah,
is. And one of the things I've been thinking about is like how the entire world, I think, would be better off if there was more animists. It's good for people and the planet.
yeah,
But it's not something that you can only believe or take on as a belief. It has to it's a fundamental shift in consciousness, I think.
yeah.
And so I've been thinking about, well, how do we convert more people to animism? Like, what
Well,
does it take? Does it take really profound spiritual experiences through plant medicine or mushrooms, or something like a candomblé ritual, which has a psychedelic effect with all the music and the scents and the movement? Does it take a direct kind of Gnostic experience, and then animism is the natural byproduct of that opening? I don't know. Have you thought about that at all?
yeah. And I've also gotten that question a lot, and I think that it's possible that all the things that you mentioned there are possibly really good suggestions, or perhaps they will be components. What I would suggest to start with is to deplace belief completely. Like your yoga teacher, man. Like, just say, this is just what's there. This is what my teacher gave me. Because when you are talking about, for instance, psychedelic experiences, or I don't know if I'm reading into what you're saying now, but I can't help thinking that perhaps you're searching for an experience of connectivity, for instance, with other than humans, that would then make it legitimate for you, or something like that. But or maybe it wasn't for you. You probably know
I'm
all
I'm
kinds of
already
elves and angels and demons and stuff.
I was gonna say
But
I'm already there, brother. But
yeah,
like,
yeah,
how do
yeah,
we
yeah,
help?
yeah.
How do
But
we missionize
but
animism
the,
in a way?
but then then for the other people, um, I think I think the basic recommendation would be to start doing it. If we start giving to a tree and asking the tree for help, we will start revealing the world to ourselves as the spirit in the tree also helping us, because we are immersing ourselves in engagement with that subject on a fundamental, like deep psychological and epistemological, perceptive level. I don't think we can avoid perceiving a someone there if we have entered into a reciprocal relationship with that someone. When we start giving and receiving back, then the someone is there already. It is there in that giving and receiving. So I would say, forget about belief. let's encourage people to start giving. And I sometimes say this when I'm asked, like, if you have an elf that lives in a stone in, say, Iceland or anywhere else, and you ask the elf, what would you like the best? That I harbor a abstract theoretical belief in your ontological validity that you exist, or a bowl of porridge? What would you like the best of these two things? I'm absolutely sure that the elf would say, I would like the bowl of porridge. It's not that the ontological validity of his existence is absolutely relevant to him. I mean, it is a little bit impolite if I walk up to you and say, "Hey, brother, I don't believe you exist." That's not particularly nice to you. So, but if you're hungry, and I gave you the choice between a bowl of porridge and my belief in your existence, you'd probably choose the bowl of porridge. And I think that there is that thing in the world that we need to start giving that bowl of porridge, because that is actually the most important thing from the animist perspective, more than thinking about and talking about the belief in, which of course is what I'm doing all the time. I'm going blah blah blah, like all my waking hours on YouTube and podcasts and whatnot. But yeah, but I'm also trying to reach into practice. Like I wrote a book about calendar rituals, and have published a wall calendar of these traditional knowledge things and so on, which is, it's a way of trying to draw lines from these very wordy thinking spaces, talking spaces, and into practical doing spaces.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, beside the kind of the kind of big revelatory experience that can convert a materialist into an animist, I do believe that there are some things that you can just do and it will change your perception over time. Like something like yoga. If you practice yoga in a sincere way, there's no way, you don't have to take on the belief that that the breath is a life force or contains a life force. It becomes apparent, and you go, oh, I get it. Prana, no longer a concept, living
Yeah,
reality,
yeah,
and that it can move, and all of that. So I do believe that, like, yeah, there's something to that. If you have to fake it for a while because it's an aspiration of yours, go for it. Give that bowl of porridge, even if you're not quite sure if there's an elf there or
yeah,
not. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that's reflected in that article that I mentioned before on taking animism seriously. There was also that being able to hold the kind of, maybe not taking on the ontological, like being so sure that the bear is a grandfather spirit, but acting as if, in a
yeah.
way, like being able to hold both is also, to me, very animistic and playful, and allows for uncertainty, that doesn't negate the value of the act or the gesture.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Like, I
It
can be
probably does, but could you
non-dogmatic about it.
tell me again? It's a little bit late over here. That it
Yeah.
allows.
Well, that it allows for a kind of ontological uncertainty while still valuing the act or the gesture,
Yeah, yeah,
the acting as if, like there
yeah,
is that, like it allows for
yeah. There's something
ontological
about,
uncertainty. Yeah.
yeah. There's something about that, as if, yeah. And I think, but I think that if you are sufficiently immersed in practice, I think uncertainty will just disappear completely.